Former FBI agent turned whistleblower Kyle Seraphin has raised serious concerns about potential conflicts of interest and internal accountability within the FBI. According to Seraphin, FBI Special Agent Christopher M. Meyer, who served as the case agent behind the search warrant executed at Mar-a-Lago, is now piloting the FBI Gulfstream 550 jet used to transport current FBI Director Kash Patel. Seraphin reports that Meyer was part of the now disbanded CR-15 squad from the Washington field office, which was reportedly shut down due to its involvement in multiple investigations targeting President Trump. Meyer also served a subpoena to Black Voices for Trump activist Harrison Floyd, who was later arrested following an altercation with Meyer and fellow agent Walter Giardino. Giardino, Seraphin notes, was also involved in the controversial arrest of Peter Navarro. Public FAA records and the Prince William County Tax Assessor's database appear to confirm that Meyer now resides near the FBI's aviation hangar and is certified to fly the G550 jet. Seraphin alleges that Meyer strategically transferred out of CR-15 between the 2024 election and President Trump's inauguration to avoid internal fallout. Joining us next is FBI whistleblower Kyle Seraphin, who was a whistleblower for Project Veritas during my time there. Kyle, what does Meyer's reassignment to FBI Director Patel's flight details suggest about internal FBI accountability?
Well, I think what it says is that there's a lot of confusion about what happens inside the Bureau. And if you don't know who the people are that you can trust, then you're going to end up with all the same problems. I was reading an article, Ken Delaney, who works over at NBC, just put out a piece that was lamenting the loss of one of the most legendary case agents in the FBI. She was the former special agent in charge of the Salt Lake City field office. And then you go pull her bio, and she was she was in the field offices from 2005 to 2008 before she moved into sort of administrative type posts. So she was a case agent for less than 3 years, if you figure 6 months for the academy and transfer and all that. So these people, if you don't know who to trust, then you don't know who's real, who's not real. And when you have the actual case agent who was in charge of the case that investigated the current president right now, which should be something that bothers people, that was a break in all decorum. It was a change. Basically, it was a breaking of a glass panel that will never be unbroken, that the FBI has now served a search warrant at a former president's house over a records, dispute. That guy managed to sneak off quietly, and now he sits, a few feet away from the sitting director, and he flies on his plane, and I'm sure they yuck it up because, it's kind of a friendly thing. When you've got a guy who's out there flying the plane, you're going to have downtime. You've got crew rest. They don't fly nonstop, so they're going to have some time where they're actually, in the back. And so he's got direct access to the current director as the guy who was maybe the reason, and certainly the person who ran the case that went into Donald Trump's house.
Unbelievable. How confident are you that this reassignment was coordinated to shield Meyer from scrutiny?
So let me give some backstory on it. First of all, we had a whistleblower come to us and share. We have inside sources, we being me and the other suspendables, former FBI agents that used to work there and now still try to tell the American people what goes on behind the scenes at the FBI. We had someone with significant, we'll call it north of a decade, somewhere between 1 and 3 decades worth of FBI time, come and say, hey, I saw this happen. I saw this guy used to work at CR-15, that's Criminal Squad 15, rather. And he was out at the NVRA, which is the FBI's field office in Manassas, Virginia. There's basically 2 parts to the Washington field office. One is in D.C., and the satellite office is out in Manassas, very close to where that hangar is. Now, I used to work right down the street from that hangar in a covert building, so I've been there a bunch of times. I've seen the FBI director's private jet. I used to have key card access to that area and the group that runs it. And it's regularly staffed by pilots who are recruited. It's a recruitable skill for the FBI to go and get special pilots that know how to fly private jets or fly Cessnas and do surveillance missions. So we're very confident that this guy kind of like dodged the bullet, saw the writing on the wall, knew that he didn't want to be there when the new president came in. And you wouldn't either, by the way. If you were the guy who was responsible for investing someone who just won an election, you might try to find a new post where you weren't in the same sort of job as you were previously, sometime between the election and the inauguration. And that's what we have, the evidence that happened. And then what you kind of laid out there with all those those documents, that is the way that you would go and substantiate this. The Prince William County tax assessor's documents is actually redacted. It says the name is withheld by the owner's request. That is a privilege that is granted to law enforcement in Virginia. It's very specific. And so people can have their name left off the tax assessor's database, because I used to go look people up as an FBI agent and find out, hey, who owns that house? Am I sitting in the right place? Am I surveilling the right individual? You go find out who owns the home. You can either find out that it's a rental or the original owner. So you look into that. It tells you a lot. Just by knowing an address, I can find out a lot about you. So we went and did that. Then we found out, of course, that the address was the one that matched his name on the FAA registry. And then, of course, the fact that he's out there flying. Those are all in close proximity to the FBI's office out there and the hangar. So all of the facts line up that this guy, he kind of just slipped under the radar, I think.
Are there broader implications for FBI leadership if politically involved agents are reassigned rather than investigated?
Yeah, of course. So look, people come into the job with their own biases. You'd hope that those people actually understood that they were supposed to put the biases aside and simply just go after allegations or information of federal crime. But the FBI is not the thing that people think it is. Everybody thinks it's this law enforcement agency. It's running down bank robbers and people that are involved in complex fraud and crime and things like this. The FBI's 50, maybe 60% function is an intelligence agency. And for people who haven't been paying attention for the last, let's say, 8 years, that's a real problem because the intel agency, what they do is they get information that has absolutely nothing to do with criminality. I myself, I'm fairly confident was investigated with an intel investigation. And then they actually took it to a grand jury and they took my Google records. They took my my social media records from X and so on. And so I know that I was investigated, but they could leave that thing open indefinitely. One of the first things that I shared with now Deputy Director Dan Bongino, sort of the irony of this thing, was the scariest thing of the FBI's, in their toolbox is being able to go and open an investigation with all the resources of the federal government and have no allegation that you're involved in any criminal activity.
Do you believe the FBI's internal structure allows agents to bypass consequences by simply transferring roles?
Not only do I believe that, everybody else can believe that too. You can simply go look into what the Office of the Inspector General's reports say about any FBI malfeasance ever. You'll go out and find that somebody did something. Let's say they paid for commercial sex while they were abroad. That was something that broke out as a scandal recently. What you find is almost nobody pays for it with their job. There's never any criminal prosecutions. And so they either get to retire or they're moved somewhere quietly and then left alone. They get, transferred to a broom closet somewhere, and then they get to revamp their careers. One of the guys who actually took my my badge and my gun, they actually took my rifle away from me when I was in Albuquerque. The craziest story was I found out that that guy had been a previous SWAT team member in Baltimore. He had gotten involved in an officer or agent involved shooting, fired at an unarmed black female and male, fired without line of sight. He actually shot through drywall and traced multiple engagements. So he fired 5 times, stopped shooting, she ran, he fired again. He was basically given a 50-50 with the shooting board on whether or not it was a justifiable shooting. He claimed that her metallic nail polish reminded him of a gun. That's what he thought it was. And then he was sent back for retraining and promoted to the chief tactical officer and the guy who was the senior SWAT team leader and the tactics instructor in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So someone who got involved in an unauthorized law enforcement shooting became the senior shooting instructor and the SWAT team commander in Albuquerque just a few years later. That's how crazy the FBI is.
That is absolutely unbelievable. Kyle, thanks so much for joining us.
No, it's my pleasure.
Stay tuned. The Trump administration is sounding alarm over the UK Labour Party's spy unit flagging social media posts about migrant hotels. Parler founder John Mates weighs in.